This is a video response to Gary Inmendham, who has recently released a two-part video for me called Fakey Cuts a Slice of Tyranny Cakey, Parts 1 and 2. I did watch Part 1 in its entirety. It was half an hour long. I watched a significant portion of Part 2, which was a full hour long. But by the time I stopped watching it, it was because I kind of had a pretty good idea of where the rest of the video was going and what you were going to say, Gary. Because I know your mind pretty well. We have known each other for a decade, and I've watched hundreds of your videos. I know how you think. You've actually been very consistent in your beliefs on here. Gary, you spoke at some length about my religious conversion and my Christianity, and you seem very upset about that. And I could speculate as to the reasons why, but I won't. In fact, I'm not going to discuss my faith with you at all in this video. I'm not closing the door on the possibility that we may someday debate that topic at great length, but for our purposes here today, I'm going to leave it off the table, because I want to talk about something else. First, Gary, I want to remind you of something that I said before I converted to Christianity, and something that I said before I even found belief in a higher power at all, long before. I want to remind you that I told you that I love you, because that's as true now as it was then. I'm reiterating it, I'm doubling down. And in case you've forgotten the reason why, I'm going to remind you of that too. See, I was dating Oceanavani at the time, and you made a video talking about why you love her. And I still remember exactly what you said. You said that if aliens landed on Earth tomorrow, she would be the only one with the courage and the curiosity to just waltz right up to them and say hello and welcome them, while everyone else would be running in fear in the opposite direction. I could describe her personality the same way, but you did it so much more eloquently. And I remember that as you said these things, you got this twinkle in your eye. And the only other time you ever get that look is when you're exhibiting your cruelty, tearing somebody apart, winning an argument. Anyway, I saw the sincerity. In that moment, I knew that you loved Christine. Now, some men in my position, given the fact that I was in a romantic relationship with her at the time, would have been jealous. But I wasn't jealous. That's not because I don't consider you a threat or something, condescending like that. The reason is because when you described your feelings for her, they were pure. You weren't talking about how hot she was and that you want to fuck her. You were talking about what makes her special, what makes her unique, and why you love her. And in that moment, I knew that you did love her. And in that moment, I loved you as a brother. And I still do. And I always will. And as much as some people may laugh about this, I think that if anyone in our dysfunctional little YouTube family, our little circle of vloggers here, is remembered by posterity, it will be you. I think that long after the name Fake Sagan and even the name The Amazing Atheist is forgotten, the name Inmendham will be remembered. I think you are the most philosophically significant user here on YouTube. And Gary, I want to talk a little bit about what I see when I look at you. a lot of people have done that. You know, a lot of people have opinions about what you are, and you've been called all kinds of things. Well, let me tell you what I see. And I'm sure that everybody is going to laugh, and I'm sure that you're going to laugh too. That's okay. When I look at you, I see a saint. I see a tortured ascetic living a cloistered monastic life because of his duty to his principles. See, nobody would choose to live the way you do, Gary. And it is a choice. It's definitely a choice. You're more educated than I am. You have a engineering degree, if I remember correctly. I didn't even finish college. You choose to live the way you do. And nobody would choose that life for himself unless he really felt the call of principle, unless he were suffering for his ideals. And believe it or not, that's something I know a little bit about. Now, Gary, you're an anti-natalist, and you're known for that position, so I'm sure you draw a lot of comparisons with Schopenhauer. But he's not the philosopher that you remind me of the most. The philosopher and the human being that you remind me of the most, Gary, is a figure from Greek antiquity known as Diogenes of Sinope. And I'm sure you know who he is. And I'm sure most of my audience does too. But in case anyone doesn't, this was a Cynic philosopher. He's the one who's famous for searching the world at night by lamplight looking for one honest man. And Diogenes lived inside of a big clay pot at the foot of the temple steps. And he subsisted on a crude diet of mostly onions, and he spent all his time hanging out with dogs. And he neglected his personal hygiene, and he would like to rudely berate and insult anybody who came up to talk to him. And one of his favorite pastimes was to masturbate all over the fine clothing of the society women who would come to the temple to worship and be seen doing so. You remind me a lot of Diogenes, Gary. And it's because the fact that your principles are so important to you that I don't understand the ways in which you apply them. And at this point in the video, Stephanie, if you happen to be watching, like maybe if Jesus Freak is watching this video and you're in the room, or you're watching it on your own computer, I would like to respectfully request, not as an imperious adult, but just as one peer speaking to another, I'd like to request that you go and find something else to do, or maybe find another video of mine to watch, because I don't want you to hear what I'm going to say next. Gary, you know, when I made my videos berating feminism, I knew that it was going to push your buttons. I knew it was going to provoke you in particular. And to a lesser degree, the other people on YouTube who call themselves feminists. But you are the guy who can't let anything slide. So I had a feeling you would make a video, and you made quite a few videos. And you called me a sexist, and you called me a misogynist, and you compared me to a slave owner of the Old South and said that my sexism was like white supremacy, racial bigotry. But I want you to take notice of something, Gary. And I want you to take notice that in my video about feminism, I wasn't dismissing women as like, oh, stupid girls, what do they know? Ah, stupid women, they're too dumb to vote. No, I didn't say that. I said that it was unfair that because men had to bleed and die on the battlefields in order to win the right to vote for ourselves, that women were simply handed that right without any responsibility for military conscription to go along with it, or any added civic duties whatsoever. They're just given a privilege. Now, children are the ones who are given things like that, gifts without any responsibility that comes along with them. And I think that feminism in many ways prescribes to treat women like children. It robs them of their agency by giving them an excuse to be perennial victims, right? Because the patriarchy is oppressing them. Now, you can call me a misogynist, and you did. Remembering, of course, that the word misogynist means woman hater. Now, maybe I hate women and maybe I don't. That's neither here nor there. But I do see them as equals. And the things that you said about Stephanie, for you to say that why should we pay for her surgery, shouldn't the husband who finds her pay for this surgery, and that way he can have whatever vagina he wants? Your words. That doesn't seem entirely consistent with equality to me, Gary. You also didn't miss an opportunity to slut-shame a 15-year-old girl when you said that perhaps the point of the operation was to make her tighter, that she's too loose. And I was very surprised and saddened to hear you saying stuff like that. You know, if you look at the position that Jesus Freak is in, whether you like him or not, he's a father, and he has a daughter who needs help. And a man in that position will do anything. He would be more than happy, I'm sure, to beg on his hands and knees to total strangers, to just go out on the street and humiliate himself, to debase himself, to do whatever's necessary to get the care that he needs for his daughter. And I'm sure that when he had to make a video requesting help, requesting funds, knowing that in order to persuade people to help, he would have to tell us what is going on with Stephanie, what her medical issues are. I'm sure it pained him to have to do that, because I'm sure that he knew that some people were going to use that information to troll Stephanie and say cruel things about her. And you know, for a teenage girl, that isn't just damaging, it can also be dangerous. Girls her age have been known to, well, do all kinds of things because of bullying on the internet, and that's neither here nor there. I'm not going to get into it, Gary. I think you probably know what I'm talking about. But anyway, I expected there to be some trolling. I expected there to be some slut-shaming, some ugly remarks. But I didn't expect them to come from you. And, you know, Gary, I've never doubted that your principles are sincere. And I'm not making an argument that faith without works is dead, or that principles only mean as much as their ability to inform our actions in life and motivate us to act in furtherance of those ideals. I'm sure that your principles are sincere, and I'm sure that you do act upon them in your own ways. But I am confused as to what feminism must mean to you. And I'm wondering if maybe you could explain that to me. What equality and feminism mean to you? Now, you said that, well, why does Stephanie need an operation like this? Because shouldn't she be saving herself for marriage anyway? Are you honestly confusing Stephanie with Jesus Freak like they're the same person? Yeah, he's her father. That doesn't mean that she's going to grow up to believe the same things that he does. She probably will grow up with Christianity as a foundation of faith throughout her life, but she'll apply that in her own way, and she'll form her own opinions and decide what that faith means for her. And it will probably be very different from what Jesus Freak's faith means to him. And if you really see women as being equals, then I don't know why you would assume that a girl is basically a clone of her dad. And because he makes arguments about abstinence and saving oneself for marriage, that therefore You know, there's no purpose for her to have this surgery, right? Well, Gary, you know, I'm not making this argument to shame you or to try to expose you as a hypocrite or anything like that. I actually consider that I'm privileged to have known you and that you've been part of my life. And truly, were I not the Fluffy Kittenist, I would wish to be in Inmendham. But I want to do something else, Gary. What I want to do is I'm going to put a picture of Stephanie up on the screen here. And I would like to extend an offer to you. And what I would like you to do, Gary, is to look at this picture of Stephanie. And I'd like to invite you to love her as you've loved Oceanavani, Christine. Now, I don't know what you see when you look at her. Clearly she's a beautiful young woman. But is there more? Look at her face. Look at the slight smile at the corners of her mouth. The slightly sad look in her eyes, even though she's smiling. What does your imagination tell you? Can you guess at the uniqueness of her as a person, the things about her that make her special and unique and worth loving, the way Christine has that kind of uniqueness? Can you see the same thing in Stephanie? And if you can, then I'd like you to imagine this scenario. You're in school, you're Stephanie, and you're in the hallway, and a boy that you like looks at you, and he smiles. And your heart starts to race, your palms get sweaty, there's a catch in your throat, and you get excited. You think about walking over to him and maybe asking him how his day went, what he's listening to on his iPod. But then you remember that there's a problem. And you start asking yourself, well, what happens if the conversation goes really well? What happens if he wants to date? What happens if he wants to kiss? And what happens if maybe he wants to go a little bit further? Now, Gary, you know, you're very good at pointing out hypocrisy, and I'm sure you're going to leap at the opportunity to point out mine. That you're going to say, hey, Fluffy Kittenist, you and Jesus Freak are Christians, so really, you know, there's no reason why this girl should be even thinking about sex at her age. Well, you know, I am a Christian, and I guess I came to that kind of late in life. But I certainly had a lot of premarital sex, and I enjoyed doing it. And while I regret a lot of it, and I think a lot of it was just selfish and hedonism at other people's emotional expense, I do think that it was important to my development as a person. And that physical intimacy is something that we all need. And something that we all deserve. Now, if anything that I've said in this video has caused you to rethink your feelings about Stephanie, then I want to extend to you another offer, Gary. See, because I have this wild theory that someday your neighbors are going to notice a smell. And the police are going to knock your door down and they're going to find that you've been dead for a week. And then the world is going to find out that you were actually worth millions of dollars. Call it a crazy theory, but hey, Gary, I gave $900. Not the most, not the least, but it was what I could afford. It was all I could afford to give. I work a shitty job. I make $9.50 an hour. I drive a beat-up 2001 pickup truck with a broken driver's side door handle, so that when I want to get in, I have to open the passenger side and push the door open and then walk around and get in. I wear clothes from Goodwill, and then I repair them when they wear out. I eat macaroni and cheese. But I gave what I could, I have the feeling that you can afford to give more. Like I said, you're a college-educated man, and unlike me, you're a homeowner. I rent. And that tells me that you have to have some resources at your disposal. And, Gary, I think that if you were to mobilize those resources to give Stephanie a better life, what you would find is that the feeling of fulfillment you get from doing that is much more real and much more satisfying than the fulfillment you get from an intellectual victory over an opponent here on YouTube. And I think you may find that feeling will follow you throughout your daily life. And it may help you to find some of the happiness that I truly believe you deserve and that I want for you. So, Gary, I'd like you to remember that this isn't about you and me, and it really isn't about Jesus Freak either. There's a third party involved who doesn't have anything to do with any of the monsters of YouTube, and that's what we are. We're the old men with thick skin. We're the monsters. We're the battle tanks of this website. We can take the abuse. Monster, by the way, also coming from the Greek and meaning that which is worth seeing. It shares etymology with the word demonstrate. Well, that's us, Gary. We're the monsters. But she isn't. She doesn't have a thick skin. She's young. She's learning. And we have the power to help her. And I think we have the duty and the responsibility to do so. And I think that through doing so, each of us could show our principles in our own way. TJ could donate and say that he's doing it for atheism. I could donate and say that I'm doing it for Christ. You can do it for whatever. But I think times like this are opportunities for us to show not only the world and one another, but also ourselves who we are. And Gary, I'd really like to show you who you are, and that it's a much better person than you probably think. If you made it this far, thanks for listening to me.